Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're going to unlock a secret weapon that top consulting firms use to make their arguments just instantly click. By the end of this, you'll have the tools to communicate your own ideas with amazing clarity, turning any confusion into conviction. So, let's get right into it. You know, this quote just perfectly captures that feeling of being lost in a sea of information. Have you ever sat through a presentation just drowning in facts, but at the end you're still thinking, wait, what was the point? Yeah, we've all been there. Today, we're going to learn how to fix that problem for good. So, why do we get so lost in that communication maze? Well, it turns out it's all about how our brains are wired. We're constantly, naturally, looking for structure and patterns. And when information is just a jumbled mess, our message, it just gets lost. Let's look at a really simple example to see what I mean. All right, take a quick look at this list. I'm going to give you 5 seconds to try and memorize it. You ready? Go. Okay, time's up. So, how many did you get? If you're like most of us, it's surprisingly hard to remember all 9 items. The reason that was so tough is because our brains are pattern-finding machines. When you just throw a random list at it, your brain has to work overtime trying to create connections and groups where there aren't any. That is a ton of mental energy you're asking your audience to spend. Now, here's where it gets really cool. What if we did that grouping work for our audience? Let's just see what happens when we add one simple layer of structure to that exact same list. It is a total game changer. And boom! Suddenly, the items are way easier to remember. By grouping them into a logical category, like dairy, we've given the brain a shortcut. It doesn't have to process 4 separate things anymore, just one single concept, dairy. And it's the same exact thing with fruit. Instead of 3 items to juggle, you just have to remember one group. The mental load is instantly lighter. You're actually making it easy for people to follow you and agree with you. And you guessed it, finally, vegetables. This simple act of grouping ideas and then stating the summary, the category, first, well, that's the core idea of the pyramid principle. You start with the main point, then you give the supporting details that prove it. Okay, so how do we apply this to something more complex than a shopping list, right? This isn't just about making random groups. There are 3 really powerful, non-negotiable rules of logic that'll help you build a solid, persuasive argument every single time. These 3 rules are your blueprint for a rock-solid argument. The first rule is all about that vertical structure, making sure your main point is a true summary of what's underneath it. The other 2 rules, they're all about the horizontal relationships, making sure your supporting points actually belong together and are in an order that makes sense. Let's see that vertical relationship in action. Imagine this is your main point, the very tip top of your pyramid. The moment you say this, it immediately, automatically triggers a question in your audience's mind. That simple question, why, that's the engine of your pyramid. Everything you put below your main point has to directly and completely answer that question. This creates this natural, compelling conversation with your audience, even if you're the only one talking. And here you can see that dialogue in action. Each of these bullet points is a clear, direct answer to the question, why is RAE the most qualified? There's no fluff, no random tangents. The logic is just airtight, and it flows perfectly from top to bottom. Now, let's talk about how to organize those supporting points, the horizontal logic. You've got 2 main options. With deductive reasoning, you're leading your audience step by step to an inevitable conclusion. With inductive reasoning, you're presenting a bunch of related observations that all point to the same powerful conclusion. So here's the crucial point. You can structure the exact same argument in 2 different ways to get a different effect. Deduction is like showing your work in math class. You walk the audience through your entire thought process. Induction is way more direct. You give them the bottom line right up front, then you provide the reasons. For a busy executive, that's often exactly what they want to hear. Okay, so this is all great in theory, but where do you actually start when you're just staring at a blank page trying to convince someone of something? Well, the answer is a simple but incredibly powerful framework for defining any problem. It's called SCQ. This is the Situation Complication Question Framework. Think of it as the perfect opening scene for any report or presentation. It sets the stage with something everyone agrees on, then it introduces the twist or the problem, and finally it frames the exact question that the top of your pyramid is going to answer. Let's look at this example. The situation, a simple, agreed-upon fact. Japan pioneered HDTV. Okay, The complication. Here's the problem. Everyone else followed them, assuming people just wanted better pictures. And that leads, logically, to the big question. This framework sets you up perfectly to present your solution as the answer. You see, when you combine the SQ framework with the pyramid principle, you totally transform your communication. You stop just listing a bunch of disconnected facts, and you start building a compelling, logical story that your audience can easily follow and, most importantly, actually understand. So, here it is, your 4-step blueprint to put this all into practice. First, you define the problem with SCQ. Second, you state your main answer, your big idea, right at the top. Third, you support that answer by directly answering why or how. And fourth, you organize those supporting points in a logical, persuasive flow. So the next time you have a big idea to share, don't just dump all the data on the table. Build a pyramid. It's the difference between just being heard and truly being understood. And let's be honest, getting what you want. So, how will you use this to transform your next presentation? Thanks for joining this explainer.